Imagine someone comes up to you and asks you to put a literal price tag on a revolution.
Right, like an actual dollar amount.
Yeah, exactly. Not in retrospect reading a history book, but right now,
Yeah.
in real time,
Yep.
with, life-changing amounts of money on the line. Because normally when we talk about global geopolitics, we are dealing in, diplomacy, ideology, or military strategy. We read intelligence briefings. We look at UN resolutions.
Right. We deal in narratives mostly. We try to guess what political leaders are feeling or what historical precedents tell us.
But then you step into the world of prediction markets, and suddenly all of that complex, really messy geopolitical theory gets boiled down to just a single cold, hard percentage point. And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive.
It really is a completely different way of looking at the world.
It is. We are looking at a genuinely intense piece of financial analysis from Predmart. This is dated June 20, 2026. And it breaks down the leveraged trading market surrounding one highly specific, incredibly high-stakes question. Will the Iranian regime collapse by December 31st, 2026?
It's a fascinating collision.
Yeah.
You have Wall Street-style speculation smashing right into an international crisis. And the way traders are evaluating human lives and government stability is it's eye-opening.
It really is. Now, before we get too deep into the numbers and the actual trading strategies, I need to give a quick heads up for you listening. We are dealing with source material today that is, by its very nature, highly politically charged.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We're talking about the Iranian regime, civil unrest, international sanctions. So we want to be crystal clear right up front that neither of us here is taking a political stance. We aren't endorsing any of the viewpoints or the protest movements or the actions described in this financial report.
We're not picking sides.
Exactly. Our only goal today is to impartially unpack the financial and geopolitical analysis that is contained in this original text. We are just looking at the math and the mechanisms here.
And, the reason the math matters to you, whether you've never traded a single stock in your life or you're a full-time day trader, is that this isn't just about reading a news headline anymore. This is about seeing how capital actually prices the stability of a nation.
Right.
We are looking at how people are using tools like 5x leverage to place these massive bets on world-altering events.
Yes.
It forces you to look past the political rhetoric and ask, when people have their own money on the line, what do they actually believe is going to happen?
And what they believe right now, as of June 2026, is honestly staggering. Let's lay out the core binary setup the market has established.
Yeah.
As it stands, prediction markets give the Islamic Republic of Iran a 90.5% chance of surviving through the end of the year.
Leaving just a 9.5% window for total collapse.
Yeah, 9.5%. So you have this overwhelming, almost absolute consensus that the regime survives the year, despite massive turmoil in the region. And I want to really dive into how traders arrived at that 90.5% survival rate, the no contract on the collapse.
It's a massive number.
It is. To understand why the market is so incredibly confident, we have to look at the massive existential stress test the country just went through a few months ago.
You're talking about February.
Right. February 28, 2026. The assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Now, in almost any authoritarian government structure, a decapitation strike on the absolute top leadership causes chaos. You would expect, a massive succession crisis, factions fighting in the streets, or a power vacuum that tears the entire system apart.
Yeah, if you look at historical precedent, a top-tier leadership vacuum like that is just prime territory for systemic collapse.
Yeah.
And the market absorbed this shock, which is arguably the most dramatic regime shock Iran has faced since the 1979 revolution. And it barely flinched.
Which is wild. And it's because of the speed of what happened next. The system proved to be ruthlessly resilient. The Assembly of Experts convened, and within 9 days, by March 9th, they had installed his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader. Just 9 days.
But, the speed of the succession wasn't even the most important data point for these traders. The real signal, the thing they were actually watching, was the behavior of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
Oh, right.
They maintained total institutional cohesion throughout that entire 9-day transition. There were no rogue generals, no splinter factions making a play for power. It held together.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the financial analysis gets incredibly pragmatic and maybe a little cynical. The source text points out that traders don't view the IRGC simply as a zealous ideological military force. They view them as a massive economic powerhouse.
Right, it's about the money.
Exactly. The IRGC controls an estimated 20 to 40% of the entire Iranian economy. we aren't just talking about military bases here. We are talking about massive construction conglomerates, telecommunications networks, import-export monopolies.
They own the ports, the highways, the literal infrastructure of commerce.
So the analogy that helps make sense of this is look at the regime like a massive, ruthless corporate conglomerate that just happens to have an army attached to it. The CEO tragically died, right? But the board of directors, the IRGC, has a deeply entrenched financial incentive to keep the company running.
Yeah, they have to protect the assets.
Right. The stock price might dip on the news of the assassination, but the company isn't going bankrupt because their survival does not depend on any one individual. It depends on their monopolies.
What's fascinating here is that, to a trader putting capital on the line, that February crisis proved the regime has genuine depth. The absolute hardest test imaginable already happened, and the system held. So think about the math of that.
Let's hear it.
If you buy a no contract at 90.5 cents and it resolves at $1 at the end of the year, you make a 9.5-cent profit. That's roughly a 10.5% return on your money.
Which is a very solid year in the normal stock market.
It is. But Predmart allows up to 5x leverage. That means you can borrow money to multiply your position. Suddenly, that 10.5% return transforms into a 47.5% return on your actual margin capital, all by December 31st.
Wow.
Yeah, so the market is pouring money into this because they view it as a high-probability yield play. The system took a direct hit, and it kept functioning.
But hold on, if the institutions are that bulletproof and everyone is so confident, why are we even talking about this? What is fueling that 9.5% chance that it all falls apart? Because right after the assassination, the odds of a collapse temporarily spiked to 17%. So what underlying rot is keeping that probability alive today in June?
Well, the bear case, the argument for the regime's collapse, is entirely driven by the economic data. And according to the source, the numbers are they're apocalyptic.
I really want to emphasize these numbers for you listening because they paint a terrifying picture of daily life there. 77.2% inflation. That is the highest inflation rate the country has seen since World War II.
It's staggering.
The IMF is projecting a 6.1% contraction in GDP, and future inflation is projected at 68.9%. And the currency. The real has lost roughly 80% of its value against the US dollar in just 5 years.
And you have to understand, an 80% loss in purchasing power doesn't just hurt the economy on a macro level. It effectively wipes out the middle class entirely. Life savings just vanish. Basic goods become unattainable luxury items.
And this is where I really have to push back on the market's 90% confidence level. If the economy is in a literal World War II level death spiral and the currency is just evaporating, aren't these traders severely underestimating the boiling point of the general public?
You mean the protests?
Yes. We saw the January 2026 uprising, widespread popular protest driven directly by food prices and unemployment. How can a trader look at millions of desperate people in the streets and say, yeah, this government is completely stable?
Well, because the market makes a very cold distinction between popular anger and institutional fracture. The January uprising showed massive public discontent, absolutely, but it was systematically suppressed by the security apparatus.
Right.
The market concluded that protests alone, no matter how large they get, do not threaten the regime on a short 6-month horizon, unless they're accompanied by an elite defection or a military fracture.
So as long as the IRGC continues to pay its own soldiers using the profits from their import-export monopolies, the public unrest just doesn't matter to the survival odds.
From a pure trading perspective, yes, that's exactly it. However, the contrarian traders, the ones actively buying those 9.5-cent yes contracts right now, are making a very specific, calculated bet.
Okay.
They aren't betting that a protest will randomly topple the government tomorrow. They are betting that this level of severe, sustained economic pressure will eventually fracture that elite consensus.
Oh, I see. They're betting the conglomerate starts fighting over the shrinking profits?
Precisely. They are betting that at a certain point, the IRGC's corporate interests will be so damaged by the collapsing national economy that factions within the military will actually break ranks to save their own wealth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. This brings up the most mind-bending part of the entire Predmart analysis. We've established the fundamental arguments for both sides. You've got resilient institutions versus a collapsing economy.
Right.
But how do traders actually make money on a 9.5% chance of a government collapsing by December 31st? Because realistically, a revolution probably won't happen by then. So are they just throwing their money away on a lottery ticket?
Not at all. because
Yeah.
they have absolutely no intention of waiting around for December 31st.
Okay, this is the mechanism I want to dive into. It's something called event arbitrage. Let's look at that spike we mentioned earlier. When Khamenei was assassinated in February, the yes contract, the bet that the regime would collapse, spiked to 17 cents out of fear.
Yeah, panic buying.
Exactly. But as the 9-day transition went smoothly, the fear evaporated and the contract dropped back down to 9.5 cents. That is a 44% decline in the value of that specific contract.
It's a massive swing in a matter of just a few weeks.
So if you were a trader who recognized that the IRGC was going to hold the system together, you could have shorted that yes contract at 17 cents. When it dropped to 9.5 cents, you just made a 44% return.
Right.
But if you used 5x leverage, that 44% becomes a 220% return on your margin capital.
And they did it without the regime actually surviving to the end of the year. They just traded the panic of the moment. They didn't need a resolution.
I was trying to think of an analogy for this, and it's kind of like, imagine you buy a cheap, totally rundown house. You never intend to live in it. You have no plans to renovate it. You are buying it strictly because you heard a rumor that a massive new highway might be built nearby.
Yeah.
You don't actually need the highway to get built. You don't need the regime to actually fall. You just want to sell the house to someone else the moment that rumor hits the front page of the local paper and the property value spikes.
That is a perfect way to look at it. If we connect this to the bigger picture of binary political markets, where an outcome is literally just either a yes or a no, the core insight is that you do not need the ultimate event to occur. You don't need a government to fall.
Right.
You just need catalysts that shift public and institutional sentiment. If you buy a yes contract at 5 cents and some new political crisis spikes the odds to 15 cents, you just made a 200% gain. And at 5x leverage, you made 1,000%. You're trading volatility. You're not trading outcomes.
Which means you have to structure your portfolio to catch those waves. The source describes something called a barbell strategy for allocating capital.
Yeah, this is really common in this space.
Yeah. So let's say you have $1,000. A trader might put 80% of their capital, so $800, on the leveraged no contract. That's their slow, steady yield play, banking on the IRGC's institutional strength to hold through December.
Right, that's the safe bet. That's the anchor.
Then they take the remaining 20%, $200, and put it on the leveraged yes contract. The analysis calls this a hedge against tail risk.
Which is really just financial jargon for a rare, extreme event that completely ruins your main bet. In this case, a sudden actual revolution.
Exactly. So if things stay calm, the 80% position slowly prints money all year. But if a massive crisis hits and the yes odds suddenly spike from 9 cents to 30 cents, that 20% position multiplies rapidly enough, especially with the leverage, to cover any losses on the no side.
It is a completely cold, purely mathematical approach to a human crisis.
And because it's mathematical, it's driven entirely by the calendar. If these traders are just waiting for rumors and news events to spike the price so they can sell, they aren't watching the streets. They are watching a very specific timeline of catalysts.
Right, they have dates circled.
So let's talk about what dates they are circling on their calendars right now in June 2026. Because according to the source, the next few weeks are an absolute minefield.
Well, the first major one is just days away, June 30, 2026. Two critical things happen on this date. First, a shorter-term Polymarket contract regarding the regime actually expires.
And for anyone unfamiliar, Polymarket is essentially a massive crypto-based prediction market where people trade shares on the outcomes of real-world events. So a short-term contract expiring means what exactly for our December market?
It means liquidity. When that June 30 contract resolves and pays out, all the capital that was locked up in it is suddenly freed up. Traders will immediately look for a new place to park that money, and the source predicts a lot of it will flow directly into the December market.
Which causes a shift.
Right, which could create temporary artificial price swings that these savvy leverage traders will exploit.
But the much larger event on June 30 is the U.S.-Iran nuclear deal market resolution deadline.
Yes, and this ties directly back to the economy, which, as we established, is the only real threat to the regime's survival.
Which leads us to the biggest near-term catalyst of all, July 2026. The extended nuclear negotiations deadline. This is the whole ballgame. The market is expecting a framework that addresses Strait of Hormuz security, sanctions relief, and nuclear constraints.
I really want to walk through how a trader views this July deadline, because it's the ultimate example of what the industry calls binary event risk. This is the terrifying moment where a single news announcement can either double your money or just wipe you out instantly.
So put yourself in the shoes of a leverage trader right now listening to this. You are staring down this July deadline. Do you buy into your position before the July announcement to capture the massive price swing when the news breaks? Or do you wait until the dust settles to avoid the binary event risk, knowing you'll have to pay a premium because the news is already priced into the market?
It's an agonizing calculation, right? Let's look at the mechanics of why this matters so much. If that nuclear framework succeeds, it means international sanctions relief.
Right.
Sanctions relief means Iran can freely export oil and access frozen international funds. That influx of foreign currency stabilizes the real, which eases that 77% inflation rate.
It essentially takes the pressure cooker off the economy.
Exactly. The elite corporate interests of the IRGC are protected, the risk of a military fracture vanishes, and the no contracts, the survival odds, will push much closer to 100%. But if the talks collapse,
Then the economic crisis intensifies. Inflation spirals further, the currency plummets again, the IRGC conglomerates start losing massive amounts of money, and the yes contracts could easily spike right back to those panic levels we saw in February.
and it doesn't even end there. The source also mentions August 31st, 2026. This is the nuclear compliance and inspections deadline.
Right, because a deal in July is just a piece of paper. August is when the market finds out if anyone is actually keeping their promises to the weapons inspectors.
Exactly. And hanging over all of this is an extended military ceasefire from April 21st, 2026. It is currently holding, pending a formal peace proposal submission. But if that proposal fails and the ceasefire collapses, military variables suddenly re-enter the pricing equation, and that completely scrambles all the economic data we just talked about.
You know, what I found just as fascinating as the dates they are watching is the event they are explicitly ignoring.
Oh, the Paris rally.
Yeah. The analysis brings up the Free Iran Diaspora rally happening in Paris on June 20th. We are talking about thousands of people gathering to call for a democratic republic. To an outside observer watching the news, that looks like a major geopolitical event. It feels really important.
Sure, it makes great television.
Exactly. But the Predmart analysis explicitly tells traders to treat it as noise to fade.
Fading the noise is a very classic trading concept. Serious analysts know that diaspora demonstrations in European capitals, no matter how passionate they are, rarely move the actual levers of power back in Tehran.
Because they don't impact the economy or the military.
Right. I mean, it might generate a lot of media attention. It might even cause a wave of amateur emotion-driven traders to go and buy the yes contract, which would bump the collapse odds up a point or two.
What?
But the professional traders, they view that strictly as an exit window to sell at a profit or a chance to buy the no contract at a slight discount.
Just a blip.
Yeah. To the market, the Paris rally is a distraction. The July nuclear negotiations are the true signal because they dictate the economic reality that keeps the regime afloat.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all of these threads together. The Predmart analysis presents a financial market that views the Iranian regime as highly resilient against sudden political shocks. They survived the ultimate test of a Supreme Leader assassination in just 9 days because the military operates like a deeply entrenched economic conglomerate.
Right, the 90.5% survival rate.
Yes, and that institutional cohesion prices their survival through 2026 overwhelmingly high. However, a historically devastating economic reality, record inflation, and a decimated currency leaves a 9.5% window for a catastrophic elite fracture.
Which is all the leverage traders need.
Exactly. They aren't sitting around waiting for a revolution to actually happen. They are actively playing the volatility of the upcoming July nuclear deadlines, using event arbitrage to turn shifts in sentiment into massive returns.
It truly is a masterclass in separating fundamental on-the-ground reality from market mechanics. But, it leaves me with a thought that I think goes far beyond just trading strategy.
I'd love to hear it.
If global prediction markets with real significant financial skin in the game, are increasingly pricing the stability of governments based almost entirely on the economic self-interest of their military elites, rather than their ideological fervor or popular support, How should that change the way we interpret international diplomacy?
Wow.
Like, if money truly overrides ideology when push comes to shove, are traditional political sanctions doing what we actually think they're doing?
Hmm.
Or are they just squeezing the public while the monopolies adapt?
That is a brilliant and honestly pretty unsettling lens to view the world through. It completely shifts how you'll read the foreign policy headlines tomorrow morning. A huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.